You know, when we think of the ancient world, it's easy to picture these massive, isolated empires. You've got Rome over here, India way over there, separated by vast oceans and deserts. But what if I told you they were all part of a bustling, globalized trade network, a kind of ancient maritime superhighway? Well, today, we're going to uncover the incredible and mostly forgotten story of the sailors who really connected that world. For the longest time, the story we were told about this trade was, well, pretty straightforward. The history books and even a lot of the ancient sources tended to put one particular empire in the spotlight right in the captain's seat. And the classic story goes something like this. Mighty Rome, with its insatiable appetite for luxury goods, builds these huge ships. And then these brave Roman sailors master the monsoon winds to cross the dangerous Indian Ocean, all to bring back exotic treasures. It's a story all about Roman bravery, Roman money, and Roman power.
And hey, to be fair, you can see why people thought that. Even sources from India itself seem to back it up. There's this ancient Tamil poem that talks about the Yavanas, that's what they called Westerners, showing up with ships overflowing with gold and leaving with pepper. It really paints a picture of a one-way street, doesn't it? Like all the action was flowing from west to east. Yeah, about that picture, turns out it's not just incomplete. It's like looking at a world map and only seeing Europe. The real story was so much more complex and honestly, way more fascinating. So, let's start with section 1. And first things first, let's give the Romans their due. The scale of their side of the operation was, and I mean this, absolutely staggering. This wasn't just a few merchants getting lucky. This was a massive industrial-scale enterprise. The Greek geographer Strabo, who was writing back in the 1st century, actually saw this with his own eyes. He reported seeing as many as 120 Roman ships sailing for India from a single Egyptian port every single year. Just let that sink in. 120 ships a year from just one port. That is an unbelievable commitment to a single trade route. And the money they poured into this was just monumental. They were chasing those high-value goods, right? Black pepper, which was literally worth its weight in gold, silks, ivory, you name it, and they paid for it all in Roman gold coin. The value crammed into just one of these ships was insane. A single cargo could be worth enough to buy nearly 2,400 acres of the best farmland in Egypt. This was big, big business. Okay, and this is a really big but, when you start looking closer at the maps and the actual archaeology, a giant hole just appears in this simple Rome-focused story. It's a puzzle that just doesn't quite add up. And here is where that neat and tidy story really starts to unravel. You see, almost all of those Roman ships docked on India's western coast, the Malabar coast. But here's the mystery. Archaeologists have found a huge amount of Roman stuff, coins, pottery, even signs of Roman merchants living there, way over on India's eastern Coromandel coast. That's thousands of kilometers away by sea. So that leaves us with a huge question. The journey from the west coast all the way around the southern tip of India and Sri Lanka to the east coast, it's really long and it's really dangerous. Most of those big Roman ocean-going ships weren't built for it and just didn't make that trip regularly. So, if the Romans weren't doing it, who was? Who was the crucial link connecting these two sides of India? The answer completely flips our whole understanding of this ancient economy on its head. It wasn't the Romans. It was a group of incredibly skilled sailors who had been the masters of these waters for centuries before the Romans even showed up in force. Meet the merchants and sailors from the Tamil kingdoms of southern India. And these guys weren't just some local ferry service waiting for Roman business. No, they were the active masters of the Indian Ocean. They had their own sophisticated, long-established trading network that stretched way beyond India's coasts. They weren't just a link in the chain, they were the engine driving a huge part of it. And they had the tech to prove it. For those coastal routes, they used special ships called sangara. Think of them as these massive dugout canoes, often lashed together to create a super stable vessel, almost like a catamaran. They were perfectly designed for hopping up and down the coasts, moving goods from west to east. But they didn't just stick to the shoreline. The Romans also described another kind of Indian ship, which they called the colandio fanta. And these things were the real deal, absolute giants of the sea. These were massive vessels built to cross the wide-open Bay of Bengal, connecting India to what we now call Burma and Malaysia. And their designs were just brilliant. Even the famous Roman author Pliny the Elder was totally impressed by their shipbuilding. He wrote about these Indian ships that were built with a prow on each end. Now, why would you do that? Well, it meant they could sail through narrow, tricky channels and then just reverse direction. No need for a wide, clumsy turning circle. It's a perfect example of purpose-built technology based on deep, local knowledge. And this is where the world map really opens up. See, the Tamil network wasn't just there to move Roman goods. It was its own massive system, stretching thousands of miles further than most Romans ever dreamed of. So picture a typical journey for a Tamil trading crew. It was an absolute epic. They'd pick up the Roman gold and other goods on the west coast, then skillfully navigate through the difficult Palk Strait. They'd trade at ports on the east coast, and then, hopping onto one of those giant Colandio Funta, they'd set sail across the vast Bay of Bengal, all the way to Southeast Asia. And look, this isn't just a theory, we have the receipts. The archaeological proof is undeniable, and it's scattered across continents. We're talking pottery fragments with Tamil names like Kadin and Kanan scratched into them, found in Egyptian ports on the Red Sea. And then, if you go in the other direction, you find Indian pottery designs from that time, dug up as far east as Bali, Indonesia. Their reach was just immense. So, what does all this mean? It means we have to take that old, simple map and basically throw it out. We need to draw a new one, a map that shows a truly connected ancient world. The big takeaway is this: it was never just a one-way street from Rome to India. It was a complex, interconnected global system with a ton of key players. The Romans were absolutely one of them, for sure, but so were Arab sailors, Ethiopian merchants, and, as we've seen, the Tamil masters of the sea who connected their home coasts to the entire Eastern world. Think of it like a giant oceanic relay race. You have the Roman ships running the first leg from Egypt to the west coast of India. Then they pass the baton to the Tamil coastal specialists, who run that tricky second leg between India's coasts. And finally, the Tamil ocean-going giants take that baton for the marathon final leg all the way across the Bay of Bengal to the Far East. And this wasn't some minor side operation. In fact, one of the top scholars of this period concluded that the Indian trade with the Far East was probably bigger, using larger ships and more of them, than the famous Roman trade coming out of Egypt. South India wasn't the end of the line. It was the bustling center of its own vast maritime world. It just makes you wonder, doesn't it? When we only focus on the familiar stories of empires like Rome, we can miss the bigger picture, a story of connection and collaboration. And it leaves you with a really big question. If we overlooked the masters of the Indian Ocean for this long, how many other ancient superpowers are still out there, just waiting for us to rediscover their story?